G'day Zedders, how you doing? Adam here from Zed Run Racing. An exciting video this one. There was an update yesterday, or not an update, there was a blog post that gives us an insight to the upcoming Zed Racing update where a number of the issues are going to be corrected. Now, the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issues that I was aware of has been addressed, but my concern is it's been pushed from the extreme this side to potentially the extreme on the other side, and that's what I want to discuss here. So that particular issue was an issue with the breeding, and the current issue in the current version of Zed Run is the fact that you're able to produce these super freak horses that are far superior racers to their parents within one single breed. Okay, so you get the two parents and you get these far superior freak horses just with one breed. So these horses were out racing the Z1ers, the best horses in the game, like straight away at a high rate as well. They were coming, quite frequently from the breeding. I've got a couple of them myself. So it'll be interesting how they dial those back and what they look like after the update. But my main concern is that they've gone from a game that was progressing way too fast in the ability to surpass previous horses to a hard ceiling. I mean, I haven't heard this exactly. I haven't got clarity on this perfectly, to be honest. But from a couple of the things I'm reading on the blog and a couple of the answers that I got from questions I asked, it looks like the horse racing ability has been capped, or will be capped. Now that, to me, is a bit of a problem because I think the game should be in a constant state of progression. Okay, yes, absolutely, the Z1 horses should dominate the early game for a set period of time. They should be the pinnacle of the crop for a set period of time. But over a number of, let's say, months or maybe even years, those selectively bred horses, the 1% horses that get bred and then bred with another 1%er and sort of slowly build your way up, should eventually catch and surpass those Z1 horses. And then again, in time, those new champions that have surpassed the Z1ers should in turn be caught and surpassed by very careful selective breeding. Now, as I said, I'm thinking from a couple of things that I've been seeing that they might be thinking of having a hard ceiling on the ability of the horses. Let me explain that a little bit more, my concerns with that. And I'm getting that from a couple of things. First of all, here's the blog post. I'll put a link to that in the description below if you want to have a look. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But here under genotype, it refers to how far away the racehorse is from its ancestors. So Z1 is the rarest and gives you the highest chance of a top performing racehorse. Absolutely, that should be the case in the early game without any breeding sort of coming into the mix just yet. The genotypes max out at Z268, meaning the higher the genotype, the lower chance the racehorse will possess a strong racing ability. Now, I agree with that as well. Let's say, for example, that the Z1 racehorses, you've got 10–15% of those are absolute elite, okay? And then that trickles down. Well, once you get into the lower Z numbers, that 10% should become a fraction of a percent, but it shouldn't be a hard ceiling. In other words, it shouldn't be the fact of the pinnacle you can reach is only as good as the best Z1 horse is currently to date. Now, the reason that is a huge problem for the game, in my opinion, is you need that constant progression. The reason people sign up for either racing in real life, whether it be horses or dogs or whatever it happens to be, any kind of thoroughbred racing, is because they fall in love with the dream of having or owning the highest money winner, the greatest horse within the game, within the ecosystem. And that should be able to be achieved in one of two ways. Either, yes, buying a Z1, which will get you, well, not just buying a Z1, but buying one of the best Z1s, which will get you to that pinnacle or near that pinnacle or give you a great head start. But you should also be able to breed rather difficultly to the top as well. So eventually you have Z, let's say, I'm not even sure how many breeds down the line you might have to go to catch up to the Z1s, but let's say eventually you've got 1% or 0.5% of the Z 8s that have been bred from Z1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 very carefully with the best horses in the game, those Z8s surpass the Z1s, you know, in a year's time or 2 years' time. Now, let me just show you why I think this might be the case, because Rob, one of the admins for Zed Run, I've highlighted it here, when I asked, you know, will there be a hard ceiling, will there be a cap to the ability? In other words, will the most talented Z1s be the best you can ever get to, or will they be surpassed? And Rob answered this with racehorses will have to peak regardless. We can't have an infinite curve, especially with the amount of racehorses available in our ecosystem and the number of races we are currently running. Now, that to me suggests there is a hard limit on the ceiling, and that, to a degree, that's okay as well, having a hard ceiling on the ability. What concerns me though is if the current horses, the current best of the, let's say the current best of the best Z1s, I don't know, there's a couple of thousand Z1s that will be in existence eventually. Let's say the top 2 or 3 of those. So the absolute pinnacle of the Z1s, the best of those Genesis horses. If that is the hard ceiling cap, then that's the only place we can ever get to. And that kind of stops the natural progression of the game. Like, for example, in real horse racing, you know, Farlap was one of Australia's greatest horses, but if he was to run in a current Group 1 race, like, forget about it. Not even competitive, okay? And, you know, horses like Black Caviar, you know, an undefeated horse in Australia, or Winx, just these absolute specimens of horses, have been carefully bred with their DNA and scientists and this and that to get to the higher level, you know, in the modern racing game. So it's okay to have a hard cap ceiling, but the hard cap shouldn't be at the starting point, which is where the Z1 horses are. For example, here we have this little graph that I've made up just to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about. If we have the ability on the vertical scale and the timeline, the time through the game on the horizontal scale, let's say the current crop of Z1 horses, the best of the best Z1s, have, say, that much ability, okay? And then let's just change the colour quickly and we'll make it green for the bred horses. And then you've got the bred horses, let's say the best of the best Z2s maybe start here, you know, with that much ability, or maybe a little bit more than that. Let's give them a bit of credit. Maybe they start with just a notch under the Z1s there. Now, with careful breeding over a number of times, you know, breeding with the absolute best Z1 champions and maintaining your what do they call it? Breed line, maintaining that level of legendary or exclusive, you should be absolutely able to come through here and a year or two's time be able to catch up to the Z1s, okay? Now, I would expect as the game progresses, the Z1s go from being the absolute premium racers and breeders to sort of stepping back a few classes as they get overtaken. And don't get me wrong, this is not looking at my own, what's going to benefit me the most, because I have just about as many or more Z1 horses than on average anyone in the game. Now, there are people that have more, but I think I've got I've got 4 Z1s and about 5 or 6 Z2s, okay? So I'm sitting pretty if they are the pinnacle of the game, but I don't want them to be. Ideally, I would like them to be for a set period of time, maybe 6 months, 12 months before the progression of the game starts overtaking them on a racing level. And then what I assume would happen is the progression would keep going as you go through like so, okay? And that would give you 5 or 6 years to eventually run the game out before the first horse reaches the hard ceiling. Let's say there is a hard ceiling in the game, because Rob suggests there is. Let's say there's a hard ceiling in the game right here. That's the best you can ever get to. Now, my concern, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But my concern is, let me grab the eraser. My main concern is, let's just get rid of that. Stick with me here. It's a pretty primitive graph, isn't it, really? My main concern is, back to the brush, is that the Z1 horses, it doesn't really matter where I place them on the timeline, but they start with maximum ability. Okay, and then if we grab our green timeline, we come from here, and eventually over time, we can catch up to the Z1s, but then that's as far as you can ever go. The game stops progressing right there and plateaus out like that. Okay, so you end up with a real glut, if you like, all racing around the same race level. You don't really have, by the time you get to that point and it progresses a little bit further, you don't have any standout horses anymore. And that's what makes the game. You know, they are the standout horses are the superstars. Now, you shouldn't be able to produce a standout horse that is the best in the game so quickly, like happened with my own horse, Ace King, and what's his name? I can't remember his name, sorry, but Winchester, for example, is another great example of a premium horse that has been bred within the first couple of months of this game, okay? And those horses have far surpassed what the current Genesis Z1's ability is. Now, I don't think that should be the case, absolutely, but I'm also very wary or scared that they're going to top out the game at the top level of the current Z1 horse. Now, that would suit a lot of Z1 owners that have the premium horses. Of course, they're going to argue that, well, no, let's make the premium horses that the absolute ceiling point. But I think it really takes a lot of the gameplay away from the game if you can't eventually catch and surpass the earlier champions of the game on all levels. I don't just mean the Z1. Once again, if we do the original one with the Zeds, here's the Z1 ability, and then we have the chasing, the breeding ability. You know, as this one comes up, they eventually catch the Z1s, and here you have, in 2 years' time, you have the new Ace King and the new Winchester, but, you know, they're on the top of the pile for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, or, you know, within the top of the pile mix for 3 or 6 or 12 months. But eventually they get surpassed and would have to drop down a class from the premium class. Okay, they've run their course, they've done their thing, much like horses retire in real life horse racing. Anyway, that's a bit of a ramble, but it's something that I think is really, really important to the overall structure of the game. And look, as a Z1 owner, and I said I have multiple, and a couple of them are really, really talented. If the Z1s are the absolute premium in the game and the best you can ever get to, you know, I'll be doing okay, but I think it will be at the detriment to the overall game because of the fact that you don't really have that dream. You come into it with that dream of being at one day having the horse that is acclaimed as the greatest horse in Zed Racing, and you know that's not gonna really happen if you can't continually progress and surpass the ability of the horses in the past. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think about that video, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks again, and bye for now.